I was standing in my front yard watching Daisy, one of my rescue horses, finally put weight on her injured leg without flinching when the white Tesla pulled up to my driveway, and a woman in oversized sunglasses stepped out holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. My name is Aaron Cooper, and I had spent the last 3 years turning my 5-acre property in Lexington, Kentucky, into a rehabilitation center for horses that nobody else wanted. The kind that came to me broken, beaten down, starving, or injured beyond what most people considered worth saving. I had 6 of them now, each with their own story of survival, each making progress at their own pace. The barn I had built was sturdy and functional, painted red with white trim, because that is what horse barns are supposed to look like. Nothing fancy, but it did the job and the horses were safe, fed, and healing. The woman approaching me wore white capri pants despite it being barely 60 degrees in early March, and her blonde hair was cut in that aggressive angle that seemed designed to match her personality. She stopped about 10 feet away, clearly not wanting to get any closer to where Daisy stood grazing peacefully in the paddock. "Aaron Cooper?" she asked, though she obviously knew who I was. "That is me," I said, walking toward her. "Can I help you with something?" She thrust a manila envelope toward me. "Linda Patterson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. This is an official notice requiring you to remove all livestock from your property within 30 days and dismantle that barn structure within 60 days. I stared at the envelope without taking it. "Excuse me. The HOA has received multiple complaints about your property. The barn is an eyesore that is negatively impacting property values in our community, and the presence of large animals constitutes a nuisance under our community guidelines." She said it like she had practiced in front of a mirror. "This property was not part of any HOA when I bought it 3 years ago," I said, keeping my voice level even though my heart was starting to pound. "I checked specifically because I knew I would be keeping horses here." Linda smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me want to take a step back. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA was established 18 months ago and encompasses all properties within a half-mile radius of Meadowbrook Boulevard. Your property falls within those boundaries. The previous owner of your land was notified and given the opportunity to contest, but since you were already the owner at that time, you should have received notification as well." "I did not receive anything," I said flatly. "That is not really my problem," Linda said, shaking the envelope at me. "You are in violation of Section 4, subsection C of our community standards, which prohibits agricultural operations and the keeping of livestock. You have 30 days to remove the animals or face fines of $500 per day per animal. That is $3,000 per day if you are keeping track." I finally took the envelope, mostly so I could read exactly what nonsense was printed inside. "These are rescue horses. This is not a commercial operation. I am not running a business here. The code does not distinguish between commercial and personal livestock operations," Linda said. "The barn itself is also in violation. It is visible from Meadowbrook Boulevard and several neighboring properties. We have standards in this community, Mr. Cooper. Perhaps you should have considered that before deciding to play cowboy." Daisy lifted her head and whinnied softly, probably sensing my rising blood pressure. I had rescued her from a kill pen in Ohio 8 months ago. She had been so malnourished her ribs were showing like a xylophone, and she had a badly infected hoof that the vet said would likely never heal properly. Now she was gaining weight steadily, and the hoof was responding to treatment. The idea of moving her, of stressing her out when she was finally feeling safe, made my stomach turn. "I will be contesting this," I said. "This is my property, and I have every right to keep horses here. There is no noise, no smell beyond what you would expect from horses, and I keep everything clean. Nobody has complained to me directly. They complained to the HOA, which is the proper channel, Linda said. And you can contest all you want, but the fines start accumulating after 30 days regardless. I suggest you start making arrangements. Good day, Mr. Cooper. She walked back to her Tesla with that particular stride of someone who thought they had just won something important. I stood there holding the envelope, watching Daisy go back to grazing, and tried to figure out how my peaceful morning had turned into this nightmare. Inside the envelope were 6 pages of densely printed HOA bylaws that I had definitely never seen before, along with the official notice Linda had mentioned. The document cited my address specifically and included photographs of my barn taken from the road. They had even included a property value impact statement from some real estate company I had never heard of, claiming that my agricultural structure was depressing home values in the area by up to 7%. 7%. They had actually calculated it to seem precise and scientific. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus Webb, the real estate attorney who had handled my property purchase. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. "Aaron, what is going on? Did you know there is an HOA claiming jurisdiction over my property?" There was a long pause. "What?" "No, that is impossible. I checked specifically. Your property was not part of any HOA. That was one of your requirements. Apparently one formed after I bought the place, and they say it covers my property now." I read him the relevant sections from the notice. Marcus swore quietly. "They cannot do that. You cannot retroactively force an existing property owner into an HOA without their explicit consent. That is basic property law." "Well, Linda Patterson seems to think otherwise, and she is threatening me with $3,000 a day in fines if I do not get rid of my horses." "Linda Patterson," Marcus repeated. "Blonde woman, drives a white Tesla, looks like she wants to speak to every manager in America simultaneously." "That is the one. She tried to pull something similar in the Creekside development last year, tried to force retrofitted HOA rules on properties that predated the HOA formation. It fell apart in court, but not before she made several homeowners miserable." Marcus sighed. "Let me do some research." "Do not sign anything, do not agree to anything, and definitely do not pay any fines. I will call you back by tomorrow." After I hung up, I walked out to the paddock where all 6 of my horses were now gathered. Besides Daisy, there was Thunder, a 20-year-old gelding who had been rescued from a hoarding situation where 40 horses were crammed onto 2 acres with no shelter. There was Maple, a beautiful chestnut mare who had been abandoned when her owner went to prison, tied to a fence with no food or water for days before a neighbor heard her screaming. There was Scout, who had been struck by a car and left for dead in a ditch with a shattered leg that took 2 surgeries to save. There was Pepper, who came from a racing stable that was shut down for abuse, her body covered in whip scars. And there was Sunny, the newest arrival, a Palomino who had been seized by animal control from someone who thought keeping a horse in a suburban backyard with no grass and a plastic kiddie pool for water was acceptable. Every single one of them had been somewhere terrible before they came here. Every single one of them was healing, slowly learning to trust again, gaining weight, recovering from injuries both physical and psychological. And Linda Patterson wanted me to uproot them, stress them out, possibly undo months of careful rehabilitation work, because someone in her HOA thought my barn was ugly from the road. I spent the rest of the day doing the normal routine, feeding everyone, checking hooves, administering medications, cleaning stalls. Physical work that kept my hands busy while my mind raced through scenarios. Where would I even take 6 horses on short notice? Other rescue operations were always full. Boarding facilities cost money I did not have in unlimited quantities, and they would not provide the specialized care these horses needed. And even if I found somewhere, the stress of moving could set back their recovery by months. That evening, my neighbor Tom Bradley walked over from his property to the east. Tom was in his 60s, a retired engineer who had lived in the area for 20 years. He kept to himself mostly, but we had a friendly relationship based on occasional conversations about property maintenance and the weather. "Saw that Patterson woman at your place today," Tom said, leaning against the fence. "She give you the HOA speech? You know about this?" Tom nodded grimly. "She came around about 6 months ago with papers for me to sign, saying my property was now part of Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. I told her where she could stick those papers. My lawyer sent her a letter saying I was not interested, and I have not heard from her since, but I know she has been targeting other properties in the area." "Can she actually enforce this?" I asked. "On you?" "Probably not legally, but that does not mean she will not try. Linda Patterson has money and time and apparently nothing better to do than make other people miserable. Word is her husband is some big shot at a finance company in Louisville, and she retired early from being a real estate agent to focus full-time on running the HOA like it is her personal fiefdom." Tom scratched his chin. "She hates your barn, you know. She thinks this whole area should be upscale suburban homes with manicured lawns, not working properties with animals." "This is Kentucky," I said. "Horses are part of the culture here. You are preaching to the choir, son." "But Linda is from Connecticut originally. She does not see it that way." Tom glanced over at the horses. "How are they doing?" "Better every day. Daisy is finally walking without pain. Sunny is starting to let me touch her without flinching. Be ashamed to move them." "I am not moving them," I said firmly. "This is their home now." Tom smiled slightly. "Good. Let me know if you need anything. I mean that." The next morning, Marcus called back with news that was both good and bad. The good news was that the HOA could not legally force me to join or comply with their rules since my property predated the HOA formation, and I had never agreed to join. The bad news was that fighting it would require actually going to court, which meant time and money. "The strategy they are using is harassment," Marcus explained. "They know they probably cannot win in court, but they are betting you will not want the hassle and expense of fighting. They will send threatening letters. They will assess fines that have no legal standing. They will try to make your life difficult until you give up and do what they want." "So what do I do? You call their bluff?" "I will send them a cease and desist letter explaining that you are not a member of their HOA, you have no obligation to follow their rules, and any attempts to enforce fines or penalties will be met with legal action. That should slow them down. And if it does not, then we file for a declaratory judgment to establish once and for all that your property is not subject to HOA jurisdiction. It will cost you a few $1,000s in legal fees, but you will win." A few $1,000s I had not budgeted for, but there was no alternative. "Do it." "Send the letter." Marcus sent the cease and desist that afternoon. I thought that might be the end of it, or at least that there would be a pause while the HOA consulted with their own lawyers. Instead, 2 days later, I came home from the feed store to find a citation taped to my front door from the County Code Enforcement Office. The citation claimed I was operating an unpermitted agricultural business on residentially zoned property, and that my barn had been constructed without proper permits. I was ordered to appear at a hearing in 2 weeks to show cause why the structure should not be condemned, and why I should not face fines for permit violations. I called the code enforcement office immediately. The woman who answered sounded bored. "Yes, we received a complaint about your property. The inspector went out yesterday and confirmed the existence of an unpermitted structure." "The barn was permitted," I said, trying to stay calm. "I pulled permits 3 years ago when it was built. Everything was inspected and approved. Our records do not show any permits for that address." "Then your records are wrong. I have copies of the permits. You will need to bring those to the hearing," she said. "But even if the barn was permitted, the complaint also alleges you are operating a commercial animal facility without a business license." "I am not operating a business. These are rescue animals. I am not making any money from this." "That is something you can explain at the hearing." She gave me the date and time and hung up. I went through my files and found the building permits, still in their folder along with all the inspection certificates. Everything was in order. The county had approved the barn construction, the electrical work, everything. Someone at code enforcement had either made a mistake or was deliberately lying. I called Marcus again and told him about the citation. "They are escalating," he said. "This is Linda Patterson trying to use the county government to do what the HOA cannot do legally. We will fight it, but Aaron, I need you to understand something. Even if you win all of these battles, she is not going to stop. People like her do not stop. They just find new angles of attack." "What are you saying?" "I am saying this could get expensive and time-consuming, and you need to be prepared for a long fight. I am also saying you might want to start documenting everything. Every interaction, every letter, every citation. If this turns into a harassment case, we will need evidence." I started keeping a journal that day, writing down everything that had happened so far and everything that happened going forward. I also installed security cameras around my property. After Tom mentioned that he had heard about HOA members in other communities vandalizing properties, they wanted gone. The hearing at code enforcement was held in a stuffy conference room in the county building. I arrived with Marcus and my folder of permits. Linda Patterson was already there with a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Ronald Kessler, the HOA attorney. The hearing officer was a tired-looking man in his 50s named Gerald Morrison. He reviewed the complaint, then looked at me. "Mr. Cooper, you are alleged to be operating an unpermitted agricultural facility. What is your response?" I slid my permits across the table. "The barn was fully permitted and inspected 3 years ago. Here is all the documentation." Gerald examined the permits, then looked at the code enforcement inspector who had written the citation, a younger man named Jeff, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. "These appear to be legitimate permits," Gerald said. "Jeff, why did you cite Mr. Cooper for an unpermitted structure when permits clearly exist?" Jeff glanced at Ronald Kessler before answering. "I was told by the complainant that no permits had been pulled. I checked our system and did not find any records." "Did you check with the building department directly?" "No, sir," Gerald sighed. "So you issued a citation based on the word of a complainant and a database search, without actually verifying whether permits existed." "It was not a question." "I followed standard procedure," Jeff said defensively. "Standard procedure is to be thorough." Gerald stamped something on the citation. "This violation is dismissed. The structure was properly permitted." He looked at Ronald Kessler. "Counselor, your client has wasted county resources with a frivolous complaint. If this happens again, there will be consequences." Ronald did not even blink. The HOA had legitimate concerns about unpermitted construction. It is not frivolous to ask the county to enforce its own codes. "It is frivolous when a simple phone call would have revealed that permits existed," Gerald said. "Now, On to the question of commercial use. Mr. Cooper, how many horses do you have on your property? 6 currently. And you are operating a business involving these horses? No, sir. They are rescue animals. I take in horses that have been abused, neglected, or injured, and I rehabilitate them. I do not charge for this service. I do not sell the horses. It is not a business. Where do the horses come from? Various sources. Some from animal control seizures, some from kill pens, some from owners who can no longer care for them and reach out to rescue networks. And once they are rehabilitated, most stay here. A few have been adopted out to carefully vetted homes, but I do not profit from adoptions. I just want to make sure they go somewhere safe. Gerald made notes. Mr. Kessler, what is the HOA argument that this constitutes commercial activity? Ronald shuffled papers. Mr. Cooper has advertised his facility online as a rescue operation, soliciting donations and offering services. That makes it a commercial enterprise requiring business licensing and appropriate zoning. I have never solicited donations, I said immediately. And I do not offer services. I have a Facebook page where I post updates about the horses for friends and family. That is it. Do you accept donations? Gerald asked. If someone voluntarily offers to help with feed costs or vet bills, yes, I accept. But I have never asked for money. That is technically commercial activity, Ronald said smoothly. Accepting money in exchange for animal care services. Marcus jumped in. No money is exchanged for services. People donate because they want to support animal welfare, not because they are paying for a service. It is no different than someone donating to a neighbor who is taking care of stray cats. It does not make it a commercial operation. Gerald leaned back in his chair. I am not seeing commercial activity here. Mr. Cooper is not operating a boarding stable. He is not breeding horses. He is not giving riding lessons. He is keeping animals on his own property, which is legal in this zoning district as long as the property is of sufficient size and the animals are properly cared for. The fact that he occasionally accepts voluntary donations does not transform this into a business. He looked at Ronald. Unless you have evidence of actual commercial transactions. The pattern of activity suggests a business operation, Ronald said, but his tone had lost confidence. Pattern of activity is not evidence. Gerald stamped another paper. This complaint is also dismissed. Mr. Cooper is not operating a commercial facility. He looked at me. However, Mr. Cooper, I would advise you to be very careful about accepting donations going forward. If it becomes regular or solicited, it could create zoning issues. Understood, I said. Linda Patterson stood up abruptly. This is absurd. That barn is a blight on the neighborhood. Something needs to be done. Mrs. Patterson, Gerald said wearily, whether you like how something looks is not a code enforcement issue. If Mr. Cooper is in compliance with county codes, which he is, then there is nothing for this office to do. If the HOA has concerns, that is a civil matter between you and Mr. Cooper. He gathered his papers. We are done here. Outside the building, Linda confronted me directly while Ronald hovered nearby looking uncomfortable. You think you won something today, she said, her voice shaking with anger. But this is not over. That barn is coming down and those animals are leaving. I will make sure of it. You need to stop harassing my client, Marcus said firmly. You have no legal authority over his property, and these baseless complaints are wasting everyone's time. We will see what is baseless when the property value studies come back showing how much damage he is doing to this community, Linda snapped. She pointed at me. 30 days, Mr. Cooper. The fines are still accumulating. Your fines are meaningless, Marcus said. You have no authority to levy them, and any attempt to collect will result in a lawsuit for harassment. Linda stormed off to her Tesla. Ronald gave Marcus an apologetic shrug before following her. "She is losing it," Marcus said quietly. "That is good for us legally because she is going to make mistakes, but it is bad for you personally because she is going to get more aggressive." He was right. Over the next week, things escalated in ways I had not anticipated. First, someone filed a complaint with the State Veterinary Board claiming I was providing veterinary care without a license. The board sent an investigator, a competent woman named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who spent 2 hours examining my horses, reviewing their medical records and asking detailed questions about their care. At the end of the visit, she seemed satisfied. "Your horses are well cared for," she said. "They are all under the care of licensed veterinarians. You are following treatment plans appropriately, and I see no evidence of you providing actual veterinary services beyond basic animal husbandry. The complaint is unfounded." "Let me guess," I said. "The complaint came from someone in the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. Dr. Mitchell could not confirm that officially, but her expression told me everything. "I would document everything you are doing," she said. "Keep detailed records of every vet visit, every treatment, every expense. If someone is targeting you, you want to be able to prove you are doing everything right." Next came a visit from Animal Control. The officer, a young guy named Travis, looked embarrassed as he explained that someone had reported me for animal neglect and hoarding. "I have to do a welfare check," he said. "It is procedure when we get a complaint." "Look around," I said, gesturing to the property. "Do these look like neglected animals to you?" Travis spent 20 minutes examining each horse, checking their body condition, their living conditions, the barn, the water supply, everything. Finally, he shook his head. "These horses are in good shape. Actually, really good shape considering their histories." He had reviewed the information I provided about where each horse came from. "Whoever filed this complaint either has no idea what animal neglect looks like, or they are deliberately lying." "It is the HOA," I said. "They want me gone." Travis made notes in his report. "Well, they are not going to accomplish it this way. These animals are well cared for. I will file my report saying the complaint is unfounded, but I should warn you, if the complaints keep coming, we have to keep investigating. It is just how the system works." "I understand." After Travis left, I sat on my porch and tried to figure out what Linda Patterson would throw at me next. I did not have to wait long. 2 days later, I received a letter from a law firm in Louisville, representing the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. The letter demanded that I cease and desist from operating a commercial animal facility on my property, remove all horses within 14 days, and pay $30,000 in accumulated fines for HOA violations. If I did not comply, they would file a lawsuit seeking a court order to force compliance, along with damages. I forwarded the letter to Marcus, who called me back within an hour. "They are bluffing," he said. "They know they do not have a legal leg to stand on, so they are trying to intimidate you with big law firm letterhead and made-up fines. We will respond with our own letter explaining reality, and then we will file for the declaratory judgment I mentioned. We need a court to officially establish that your property is not subject to HOA jurisdiction, so this stops." "How long will that take?" "Months, probably. But in the meantime, they cannot actually do anything. They cannot collect those fines. They cannot force you to remove your horses, nothing. As long as you do not voluntarily comply, they are toothless." "What is this going to cost me?" Marcus hesitated. "For the declaratory judgment, probably $5,000 to $7,000 in legal fees, depending on how much they fight it. If they actually file a lawsuit and we have to defend, it could be more." I thought about my savings, about the money I kept reserved for emergency vet care and feed. Do it. File for the declaratory judgment. You are sure? I am not letting them win. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. Not by me, but by the HOA. Despite having no legal basis for their claims, Linda Patterson and her attorney filed suit in county court seeking to force me to comply with HOA regulations and pay the fictitious fines. It was a ridiculous case built on nothing, but it was also a real lawsuit that required a real response. Marcus filed our motion to dismiss, along with a counterclaim for harassment and abuse of process. We also filed the motion for declaratory judgment, asking the court to officially rule that my property was not subject to HOA authority. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, life continued, but with an undercurrent of constant stress. Every day I wondered what would come next. Every time a car slowed down near my property, I tensed up. The security cameras caught someone walking around my barn at night, though I could not identify them. Nothing was damaged, but the message was clear. They were watching, probing for weaknesses. The horses, thankfully, were oblivious to the human drama. Daisy continued to improve, now trotting short distances without discomfort. Sunny was letting me groom her without panicking, a huge step forward. Thunder had put on over 100 pounds and looked like a normal, healthy horse instead of a skeleton. Maple had bonded with Scout, and the two of them were inseparable, grazing together, sleeping near each other. Pepper had stopped flinching when I raised my hand, finally understanding that hands meant affection here, not pain. I posted updates about their progress on my personal Facebook page, just photos and brief captions. Nothing public, just for the small group of friends and family who followed along. 2 days after posting photos of Sunny finally eating hay without fear, I got a cease and desist letter from the HOA attorney claiming I was using social media to promote my illegal commercial operation and demanding I remove all posts. I called Marcus. Can they actually force me to take down personal Facebook posts? Absolutely not. That is a First Amendment issue. They are really reaching now. He laughed, though it sounded tired. Keep posting. Document their response. This helps prove harassment. The preliminary hearing arrived in early May. Lexington was beautiful that time of year, everything green and blooming, perfect weather for horses to be outside enjoying life. I met Marcus at the courthouse, both of us dressed in suits that felt strange and formal. The courtroom was nearly empty except for the parties involved. Linda Patterson sat at the plaintiff table with Ronald Kessler. She wore a navy suit and had her hair pulled back severely, clearly trying to look professional and serious. I sat with Marcus at the defense table. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Margaret O'Brien. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and fair, according to Marcus. She reviewed the filings with a neutral expression, then looked up. "This appears to be a straightforward property rights issue," Judge O'Brien said. "Mr. Kessler, your clients claim that Mr. Cooper's property is subject to Meadowbrook Estates, HOA regulations. What is the basis for that claim?" Ronald stood up. "Your Honor, the HOA was properly established 18 months ago with boundaries that encompass Mr. Cooper's property. All property owners within those boundaries received notification and opportunity to contest. Mr. Cooper's property falls within the defined area, therefore he is subject to HOA regulations. Did Mr. Cooper agree to join the HOA? Membership is not voluntary for properties within the boundaries, Your Honor. The HOA was established through a majority vote of property owners in the area." Judge O'Brien looked at Marcus. "Mr. Webb," Marcus stood. "Your Honor, It is well-established law that HOAs cannot retroactively claim jurisdiction over properties whose owners have not consented. My client purchased his property specifically because it was not part of an HOA. He built his barn with proper permits, and he uses his property in a lawful manner. The HOA's attempt to force compliance with regulations that did not exist when he purchased the property violates his property rights. Did your client receive notification of the HOA formation? He did not, Your Honor. The HOA claims notice was sent, but my client never received it, and even if he had, he never agreed to join. Judge O'Brien made notes. Mr. Kessler, do you have proof that Mr. Cooper received notice? We have proof that notice was mailed to his address, Your Honor. Whether he actually read it is not our responsibility. That is not what I asked. Do you have proof he received it? Certified mail receipt, acknowledgement, anything? Ronald hesitated. No, Your Honor, but proper notice procedures were followed. Proper notice procedures for what? You are claiming authority over someone's private property. The burden is on you to prove they agreed to that authority. Judge O'Brien looked at the paperwork again. I am granting the motion to dismiss the HOA complaint. You have not established legal authority to regulate Mr. Cooper's property. She looked at Marcus. Your motion for declaratory judgment is granted. This court rules that the property located at 1847 Hickory Lane is not subject to Meadowbrook Estates HOA jurisdiction, and that the HOA has no authority to regulate Mr. Cooper's use of his property, assess fines, or otherwise interfere with his property rights. Linda Patterson made a noise that was almost a gasp. Ronald looked stunned. Furthermore, Judge O'Brien continued, I am deeply concerned about the pattern of behavior described in Mr. Cooper's counterclaim. The evidence shows repeated baseless complaints to government agencies, threatening letters, and what appears to be a coordinated harassment campaign. Mr. Kessler, I suggest your client cease all contact with Mr. Cooper immediately. If I see this case in my courtroom again, because the HOA continues to harass him, I will consider sanctions. Your Honor, the HOA has legitimate concerns about property values and community standards, Ronald began. The HOA has no authority over Mr. Cooper's property, as I just ruled. Their concerns are irrelevant. Judge O'Brien banged her gavel. We are done here. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was grinning. That was better than I hoped. Judge O'Brien does not play games, and she clearly saw through their tactics. Is it really over? I asked. Legally. Yes. They have no case, and they know it now. But people like Linda Patterson do not give up just because a judge tells them they are wrong. Be careful. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The horses were safe. The barn was safe. Nobody could force me to do anything. For the first time since Linda Patterson showed up at my property, I felt like I could breathe. That feeling lasted exactly 3 days. I woke up on a Thursday morning to find that someone had spray-painted "Animal Abuser" across the side of my barn in bright red letters. The security cameras had been spray-painted over as well, their lenses blocked with black paint. Whoever did it knew where the cameras were and had deliberately disabled them first. I called the police. A deputy named Rachel Torres came out to take a report. She photographed the graffiti, examined the disabled cameras, and took my statement. You know who did this? She asked. I have a pretty good idea. I have been in a legal dispute with the local HOA. They have been trying to force me to get rid of my horses, and a judge just ruled against them a few days ago. You think the HOA president did this? I think someone associated with the HOA did it. I do not have proof, but the timing is suspicious. Deputy Torres made notes. We will investigate, but without video footage or witnesses, it is going to be hard to prove who did this. I would recommend getting new cameras with backup recording to a cloud service, so even if someone disables the camera itself, you still have the footage. I spent that afternoon cleaning the paint off my barn and installing new security cameras with exactly the setup Deputy Torres recommended. The whole time, I kept thinking about what Marcus had said. People like Linda Patterson do not give up. 2 nights later, the new cameras caught something. At 2 in the morning, a dark sedan pulled up near my property line. 2 people got out, both wearing hoodies and masks, and walked toward my barn. One of them was carrying something, but I could not see what it was in the darkness. I called 911 immediately. There are people on my property near my barn where I keep horses. I have had problems with vandalism before. The dispatcher kept me on the line while sending units. Stay inside your house. Do not confront them. Through my window, I watched the figures near the barn. One of them appeared to be trying to open the barn door. My heart hammered. All 6 horses were inside for the night. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The 2 figures froze, then ran back to their car. They peeled out just as 2 sheriff's cruisers came flying up my driveway. I ran outside. Deputy Torres was one of the responding officers. "Are you okay? Did they get into the barn?" "I do not think so. The door looks closed." I checked anyway, my hands shaking. All 6 horses were fine, startled by the commotion but unharmed. The barn door was still locked from the inside with the heavy bolt I used every night. The other deputy, an older man named Frank Morrison, examined the area around the barn with a flashlight. "Found something," he called. We walked over. On the ground near the barn door was a crowbar and a red gas can, the kind used for refueling lawn equipment. The can was full of gasoline. The smell was unmistakable. My stomach dropped. They were going to set fire to my barn. "Looks that way," Deputy Morrison said grimly. With the horses inside, Deputy Torres was already on her radio calling for detectives and evidence collection. "This is attempted arson, maybe attempted animal cruelty. We need to take this seriously." The scene became controlled chaos. More officers arrived. Evidence technicians photographed everything, collected the gas can and crowbar, took samples. A detective named Robert Harrison interviewed me, taking detailed notes about the HOA situation, the court ruling, the previous vandalism, everything. "I am going to be honest with you, Mr. Cooper," Detective Harrison said. "This is serious. If those people had succeeded, you could have lost your barn and all your animals. They clearly intended to cause significant damage. Do you have the security footage?" I pulled it up on my phone, showing him the dark sedan, the 2 hooded figures. The license plate was not visible and the people were too covered up to identify. "Send that to me," he said, giving me his email. "We will analyze it, see if we can enhance anything. And we will definitely be having conversations with certain people about their whereabouts tonight." "Linda Patterson," I said. "I am not going to discuss suspects with you," Detective Harrison said, "but let us just say we will be thorough." After everyone left and the sun came up, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee that I was too shaken to drink. Someone had tried to burn down my barn with 6 living, breathing horses trapped inside. 6 animals who had already survived hell once and had finally found safety. Someone had decided that property values or aesthetic preferences or whatever justified burning them alive. Tom came over later that morning after seeing all the police activity. "What happened?" I told him. His face went white. "Those animals could have died. You could have been hurt trying to save them." "I know. It was her, was it not? Linda Patterson." "The police will not say, but who else could it be?" Tom sat down heavily on my porch steps. "This has gone too far. This is not about HOAs anymore. This is criminal." The detective work moved faster than I expected. 2 days later, Detective Harrison called me. "We have made arrests," he said. "Two individuals have been charged with attempted arson, criminal trespass, and attempted animal cruelty. I cannot give you names yet, but they will be public record soon." Was Linda Patterson one of them? No, but the two individuals who were arrested have been cooperating with us. We are still investigating whether anyone else was involved in planning this. The names became public that evening. The two people arrested were Bryce Winters and Kyle Hart, both residents of Meadowbrook Estates and both members of the HOA board. According to news reports, they had confessed to the attempted arson but claimed it was their own idea, not directed by anyone else. I did not believe that for a second, and apparently neither did Detective Harrison. 3 days later, Linda Patterson was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit arson and solicitation of a crime. According to the news, police had obtained text messages between Linda and Bryce in which Linda had explicitly discussed solving the horse problem permanently and suggested that maybe the barn should have an accident. Bryce had responded enthusiastically, and Linda had provided him with information about my schedule and property layout. It turned out the dark sedan belonged to Kyle, and phone records placed both Kyle and Bryce near my property at the time of the attempted arson. Linda's phone records showed she had been texting both of them throughout the evening, including a message sent at 1:53 in the morning, just 7 minutes before they arrived at my property, that said, "Do it now." The case became local news. Horse rescue activist targeted by HOA, arson attempt foiled, prominent HOA president arrested. My phone started ringing with reporters wanting interviews. I declined all of them. This was not about publicity or attention. This was about keeping 6 innocent animals safe. Linda Patterson, Bryce Winters, and Kyle Hart all bonded out of jail within 24 hours. The court imposed strict conditions, including no contact with me and no going within 500 feet of my property. I installed even more security cameras and started sleeping with my phone next to my bed, ready to call 911 at any moment. Marcus called to congratulate me in his way. "Well, you wanted the harassment to stop. It definitely stopped, though not exactly how we planned." "Are they going to prison?" I asked. "Too early to say. Attempted arson is serious, especially with the animal cruelty component. The prosecutor is taking it seriously, but they have money for good lawyers, so who knows? At minimum, they are facing probation, restitution, community service. At maximum, several years in prison. The preliminary hearing for the criminal charges was scheduled for June. In the meantime, life slowly returned to a new kind of normal. The horses kept healing. Daisy was now moving completely normally. Her hoof infection finally resolved after months of treatment. Sunny had become affectionate, nickering when she saw me and coming over for scratches. Thunder and Maple had both gained enough weight that they looked like completely different animals compared to their rescue photos. Scout's leg had healed remarkably well, and she was moving without a limp. Pepper's scars were fading, and more importantly, her fear was fading. I had started to think about the future, about taking in more rescues once I had space available. Maybe building a second barn, maybe getting more help so I could expand the operation. There were so many horses out there who needed someone to care, who needed a second chance. Then I got a phone call from a number I did not recognize. "Is this Aaron Cooper?" A woman's voice, older, tired. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Patricia Patterson. I am Linda's mother." I almost hung up. "I do not think we should be talking. Please, just listen for a minute. I know what my daughter did was wrong. Unforgivable, really. She has always been controlling, always needed things her way, but this crossed every line. Patricia sighed. I am calling because I want to apologize to you. Not on her behalf, because she should do that herself and probably will not, but from her family. We are horrified by what happened. Those poor horses could have died. They still could have if the police had been 30 seconds slower, I said. I know, I am so sorry. Patricia paused. I also wanted you to know that the HOA has been dissolved. The other board members resigned immediately after the arrests. Most of the neighborhood residents never wanted this fight in the first place. It was all Linda pushing her agenda. Without her and the others, there is no HOA anymore. Your property is safe. That information should have made me feel relieved, but mostly I just felt tired. Thank you for telling me. My daughter is sick, Mr. Cooper. I do not mean that as an excuse, but as an explanation. She has spent her whole life trying to control everything around her because she cannot control what is inside her. She needs help, professional help, but she refuses to get it. Now she is facing prison time, and I do not know if she will ever understand what she did wrong. Your daughter tried to kill 6 animals because she thought my barn was ugly, I said. That is not illness. That is cruelty. You are right, Patricia said quietly. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in the Patterson family is like her, and I hope your horses continue to thrive. She hung up before I could respond. The criminal trial began in July. I had to testify about the harassment campaign, the vandalism, the night of the attempted arson. It was harder than I expected, reliving all of it in front of a courtroom full of strangers. But I got through it, explaining how I had rescued each horse, what they had been through, what it would have meant if they had died in a fire. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Elizabeth Garrett who treated the case with the seriousness it deserved. She walked the jury through the text messages, the phone records, the timeline. She showed photos of the gas can and crowbar. She brought in a fire investigator who testified that if the barn had been set on fire with 6 horses locked inside, they would have had almost no chance of survival. The defense attorneys tried to argue that their clients had just been trying to scare me, not actually hurt anyone, that they had not actually lit the fire, so no real harm was done, that Linda's text messages were taken out of context and did not constitute conspiracy. The jury did not buy it. After 3 days of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, they came back with guilty verdicts on all counts for all 3 defendants. Sentencing happened in August. Bryce Winters got 5 years in prison with 3 suspended, meaning he would serve 2 years and then be on probation. Kyle Hart got the same sentence. Linda Patterson, as the instigator and conspiracy organizer, got 7 years with 4 suspended, meaning 3 years in prison. Additionally, all 3 were ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my property, my legal fees, and a fine to an animal welfare fund. The total came to over $70,000 split between them. Judge Michael Brady, who presided over the criminal trial, gave a statement before sentencing that stuck with me. This case is about more than property disputes or neighborhood aesthetics, he said. This is about fundamental respect for life, both human and animal. The defendant, Linda Patterson, decided that her preferences were more important than the lives of 6 innocent creatures who had already suffered abuse and neglect. She recruited others to carry out an act of violence that would have caused immense suffering and death. There is no excuse for this behavior, no justification. A civilized society cannot tolerate this level of callous disregard for life. Linda Patterson cried during sentencing. Her husband, a quiet man in an expensive suit who had sat through the entire trial looking shell-shocked, had apparently filed for divorce halfway through. Her mother, Patricia, was there, looking ancient and sad. I did not feel satisfaction watching Linda Patterson be led away in handcuffs. Mostly I felt exhausted and ready for all of it to be over. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into a perfect August afternoon. Marcus met me on the steps. "It is done," he said. "Finally." "Thank you for everything," I told him. "I could not have fought this without you." "You are a good man, Aaron. Those horses are lucky to have you." Marcus shook my hand. "Go home to them. Put this behind you." I drove back to my property in Lexington, where 6 horses were waiting. Tom was there checking on them, something he had been doing every day since the attempted arson. He waved as I pulled up. "How did it go?" he asked. "Guilty on all counts. Prison time for all 3. Tom nodded slowly. "Good, that is good. Justice done." We stood together watching the horses graze in the late afternoon sun. Daisy rolled in the grass, her legs kicking up happily. Sunny and Maple were playing, chasing each other in circles. Thunder stood under a tree, his eyes half closed in contentment. Scout and Pepper were grazing side by side, peaceful and calm. "They look happy," Tom said. "They are safe," I replied. "That is all I ever wanted." Over the following weeks, life settled into genuine normalcy for the first time in months. The barn got a fresh coat of paint to cover where the graffiti had been. The security cameras stayed up, but I found myself checking them less obsessively. The horses continued their routines, eating and sleeping and playing without any awareness of the human drama that had swirled around them. I got a call from a woman named Helen Nash in September. She worked with a large animal rescue network based in Louisville and had heard about my case through the news. "I know you have been through a lot," Helen said, "but I wanted to reach out because we are constantly looking for good foster homes for rescue horses. You clearly know what you are doing, and your animals are thriving. Would you be interested in partnering with our network?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to keep my head down, avoid attention, just care for my 6 horses and live quietly. But another part of me remembered why I started doing this in the first place. There were so many horses who needed help, who needed someone to give them a chance. "Tell me more," I said. Helen explained how the network operated. They would handle the initial rescues, the legal aspects of seizures, the emergency medical care. Then they would place horses with experienced foster homes where they could recover and rehabilitate before being adopted out. The network would cover major medical expenses and provide ongoing support. Foster homes would provide day-to-day care, training, and love. "We would not overwhelm you," Helen assured me. "Maybe 1 or 2 horses at a time, depending on your capacity, and you would have full say over which horses you take and when." It sounded perfect, actually. A way to help more animals without taking on all the financial burden myself. "I am interested," I told her. "Let me get through the rest of this year, make sure everything is stable, and we can talk in January about me joining the network." "That sounds perfect. Thank you, Aaron. We need more people like you." The media attention from the trial had an unexpected side effect. People started reaching out offering support. Some sent donations for horse feed and vet care. Some volunteered to help with barn maintenance or cleaning. A local feed store owner called to say he would give me a discount on all my purchases going forward. A farrier offered to trim hooves for free. The community, the real community beyond the defunct HOA, had rallied around what I was doing. Tom and I became closer friends through everything. He started coming over most evenings to help with feeding and to just talk. He told me about his career as an engineer, his late wife who had passed away 5 years ago, his kids who lived out of state and did not visit much. The horses gave him something to do, a reason to get up and come outside. "You know what I like about horses," Tom said one evening as we watched Sunny investigate a butterfly. They do not care about property values or neighborhood standards or any of that human nonsense. They just want to eat and be safe and maybe play a little. We could learn something from that. Probably, I agreed. In October, I got a letter from Patricia Patterson. It was handwritten on nice stationery, the kind that older women keep for important correspondence. "Dear Aaron," it began, "I am writing to update you on Linda's situation. She is currently in the Women's Correctional Facility in Pewee Valley, serving her sentence. I visit her once a week, and I can tell you she is struggling greatly with what she did. She has started counseling, which the prison offers, and for the first time in her life, she is being forced to confront her behavior and its consequences. I do not expect you to forgive her, and I am not asking you to. But I wanted you to know that she is trying to understand what drove her to such terrible actions. She asked me to tell you that she is sorry, though I know those words are inadequate given what she did. On a different note, the restitution payments are being made according to the court order. Linda's assets have been liquidated to pay her share, and Bryce and Kyle are making monthly payments. You should start seeing those funds soon. I hope your horses continue to do well. I follow your Facebook page. I hope you do not mind. Seeing their progress brings me some peace in all this darkness. With sincere regards, Patricia Patterson." I read the letter twice, trying to figure out how I felt about it. Did I forgive Linda Patterson? No. What she did was unforgivable. But did I hope she could change, could become a better person? I suppose so. Mostly, though, I just did not want to think about her anymore. The restitution money did start arriving in November. It was substantial, enough to cover all my legal fees and then some. I put the extra money into a fund for emergency vet care and facility improvements. The barn could use better insulation for winter. The fencing needed some repairs, and I wanted to build a covered arena so the horses could exercise even in bad weather. By December, my property looked better than it ever had. The barn gleamed with fresh paint. The fencing was solid and safe. The horses were fat and happy heading into winter. I had started planning for the covered arena, getting quotes from contractors, figuring out the permitting process. On Christmas Eve, Tom came over with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. We sat on my porch despite the cold, watching the horses in their winter blankets standing peacefully in the barn. "Hell of a year," Tom said, pouring 2 generous drinks. "That is an understatement. You could have given up, sold the property, moved somewhere easier, found homes for the horses. Nobody would have blamed you." "I never considered it," I said honestly. "This is my home. They are my responsibility." Tom raised his glass. "To standing your ground." "To standing my ground," I echoed, and we drank. The new year arrived quietly. No drama, no legal battles, no HOA threatening letters. Just cold January weather and horses who needed feeding and a routine that was finally, blessedly normal. Helen Nash called in mid-January as promised. "We have a situation that might be right for you," she said. "A 9-year-old mare seized from a neglect case in Indiana. She is malnourished and has trust issues, but no major injuries. She would need a few months of rehabilitation, and then she would be ready for adoption. Are you interested?" I walked out to my barn, looking at my 6 horses. I had room for 1 more. I had experience with neglect cases, and I had a lot of love to give. "Send me her information," I told Helen. "Let me see if she is a good fit." The mare's name was Luna, and her photos broke my heart. She was a gray mare with gentle eyes that looked haunted. Ribs showing, coat dull, the telltale signs of long-term neglect. But something in her expression said she still had hope, still had the will to recover. "I will take her," I told Helen the next day. Luna arrived on a cold Tuesday in February. The transport trailer pulled up and they carefully unloaded her. She was worse in person than in photos, every bone visible, her head hanging low. But she walked calmly into the barn, and when I showed her to her stall with fresh hay and clean water, she looked at me with something like gratitude. "Welcome home," I told her quietly. "You are safe now." Over the following weeks, Luna started to blossom. She gained weight steadily on a carefully managed refeeding program. Her coat began to shine. Most importantly, she started to trust. She let me touch her without flinching. She came to the fence when I called. She played with the other horses, particularly bonding with Daisy, who seemed to understand exactly what Luna had been through. By April, Luna was ready for adoption. Helen brought over a family who had been looking for a horse for their teenage daughter, an experienced rider who wanted a project horse to love and train. I watched them interact with Luna, saw the gentleness and patience, and knew it was a good match. "She has been through a lot," I told the mother, Jennifer. "She needs someone who will be patient with her." "We understand," Jennifer said. "We want to give her the life she deserves." Watching Luna load into their trailer to go to her new home was bittersweet. I was happy she was getting a second chance, a family who would love her. But I had grown attached, the way you do when you save something and watch it heal. Tom found me standing by the fence after they left. "You did good," he said. "She's going to have a great life because of you." "One more saved," I said. "How many more do you think you can save?" I looked at my barn, my property, these 5 acres that had become a sanctuary for the broken and discarded. "As many as I can." Over the next year, I fostered 4 more horses through Helen's network. Each one came to me damaged in some way, and each one left healthy, confident, and headed to a loving, permanent home. My reputation in the rescue community grew. People started calling me directly, asking if I could take horses from bad situations. I had to say no sometimes. I only had so much space, so much time, so much money even with the network support. But every time I said yes, every time I watched a frightened, broken horse transform into a healthy, trusting animal, it felt like the most important thing I could possibly be doing with my life. Linda Patterson was released from prison after serving 2 years of her 3-year sentence, getting time off for good behavior. I heard about it through Patricia, who had continued to send occasional letters updating me. Linda had apparently moved to Florida to live with her sister, far away from Kentucky and the wreckage of her former life. I hoped she had found peace, or at least that she was no longer hurting anyone. Bryce Winters and Kyle Hart served their time and returned to the community. I saw Kyle once at the feed store, and we made eye contact for a brief, awkward moment before he quickly left. I did not feel anger anymore, just a sort of distant pity for people who had made such terrible choices. The property values in the area, ironically, went up. Turned out that having a well-maintained horse rescue operation was actually appealing to many buyers, not the neighborhood eyesore Linda had claimed. Tom sold his property eventually to a young couple with kids who were excited about having horses nearby. They brought their children over regularly to visit and learn about the animals. I never did build the covered arena. Instead, I used that money to add 4 more stalls to the barn, expanding my capacity to help more horses. The network funding helped with costs, but I still spent most of my income on horse care. I did not mind. I had never been motivated by money anyway. On a warm evening in late May, 3 years after Linda Patterson first showed up at my property with her clipboard and her demands, I stood in my front yard counting horses. I had 8 now, 4 of my original rescues plus 4 new fosters in various stages of rehabilitation. The sun was setting, painting everything golden, and every single horse was healthy and calm and safe. Thunder, now 23 years old, had become the wise old man of the herd. He watched over the younger horses like a gentle grandfather. Daisy's old hoof injury only bothered her on the coldest days. Maple and Scout were still inseparable. Pepper had learned to trust completely, becoming affectionate and sweet. Sunny, my former terrified palomino, was now confident enough that I was considering making her available for adoption to an experienced home. The 3 new fosters were settling in well. A young colt named Jasper who had been abandoned at a fairground. An elderly mare named Grace, whose owner had died and whose family wanted nothing to do with her. And a thoroughbred named Ace who had been injured on the track and discarded when he could no longer race. Each of them had a story. Each of them was healing. Each of them mattered. Tom walked over with his evening coffee, his daily routine now. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had given in to the HOA?" he asked. I had thought about it. If I had moved the horses, dismantled the barn, let Linda Patterson win. Those 6 original horses would have been uprooted, stressed, their rehabilitation set back or destroyed. And I never would have expanded into fostering, never would have helped dozens of horses find their way to new lives. Everything would be different, I said. Worse. But you stood your ground, you fought back, you won. I looked at the horses grazing peacefully as darkness fell. They won, I corrected. I just made sure they had the chance. Tom smiled. That is what winning looks like, Aaron. That night, after Tom went home and the horses were settled in their stalls, I sat on my porch and opened my laptop. My Facebook page had grown considerably, now followed by thousands of people who cared about horse rescue. I posted photos of the current crew with a brief update about everyone's progress. The comments poured in immediately. People loved following the stories, loved seeing animals get second chances. Several people asked if I accepted donations, which I did through the rescue network. Someone asked if I gave tours, which I had started doing occasionally for small groups to educate people about rescue work. But my favorite comment came from someone I did not know, someone who had just stumbled across my page somehow. It said simply, "Thank you for not giving up on them. The world needs more people like you." I had not set out to be special or remarkable. I had just wanted to help some horses and live peacefully on my own property. But somehow, through fighting the HOA, surviving the attempted arson, standing up for what was right even when it was hard and expensive and scary, I had built something meaningful. This was my life now. These horses, this barn, this work. It was not glamorous. It was hard, constant, often heartbreaking work. But it mattered. Every horse that came here broken and left whole was proof that it mattered. I closed the laptop and walked out to the barn one more time. Inside, 8 horses stood in their stalls, some sleeping, some munching hay, all of them safe and warm. I checked water buckets, adjusted blankets, spoke quietly to each one when I reached Daisy's stall. She pushed her nose against my chest in the way she did when she wanted attention. I scratched behind her ears, thinking about the broken, starving horse I had pulled from that kill pen. She bore no resemblance to that animal anymore. She was healthy, confident, loved. "We did okay," I told her quietly. "We made it through." She snorted softly, her breath warm against my hand, and in that simple moment I felt the truth of everything that had happened. The fight with the HOA had been terrible, traumatic, and dangerous. But it had also clarified what mattered. It had forced me to define my values and defend them. It had connected me with a community of people who cared about the same things I did. Most importantly, it had kept these animals safe. That was what everything had been about from the beginning. Not property rights or legal principles or standing up to bullies, though those things mattered too. It had been about making sure 6 innocent creatures who had already suffered enough did not have to suffer anymore. I walked back to my house, tired but content. Tomorrow I would wake up and feed everyone, clean stalls, check hooves, administer medications. The routine that had sustained me through everything would continue. And eventually, Helen would call with another horse who needed help, another life that needed saving. I would say yes, because that was who I had become. Not someone who backed down, not someone who let others dictate what happened on his own property, not someone who abandoned those who depended on him. I was someone who stood his ground, who fought for what was right, who gave broken things a chance to heal. The HOA had tried to remove my rescue horses, calling the rehab barn a neighborhood eyesore. Instead, they had ended up in prison, their organization dissolved, their lives in ruins. And my horses? They were thriving, surrounded by peace and safety and love. That was justice. That was what winning really looked like. Not revenge or satisfaction, but simply the continuation of good work, the ongoing protection of innocent lives, the daily choice to care when it would be easier not to. I fell asleep that night with the window open, listening to the quiet sounds of horses settling in for the night. No sirens, no drama, no threats. Just peace, hard-won and precious. Just home exactly as it was meant to be.